The traditional way of fleet management is finally over, but what does that mean? Let me tell you a story about hypothetical Sheriff Joe Miller. He always wanted to be a sheriff. As a kid, Joe would sit down in front of the TV and watch his heroes defeat the bad guys. He grew up knowing this is what he wanted to do, so he started taking gun training and tactical courses and being physically fit so he could keep himself focused on becoming a sheriff. When the time finally came, he campaigned and he won. He achieved his lifelong dream of becoming a sheriff. He thought his job was going to be like what he saw on TV when he was growing up. But the reality is that he's more like the boss of a small business. His job isn't out catching bad guys on the daily. Instead, he's now having to sit in endless meetings. He has to worry about budgets and supplies and salaries. He has to stress about the morale of his squad. Joe also has to be concerned about the transportation needs so that his office can fulfill their duties. Joe doesn't have time to worry about vehicles breaking down or being in the shop or having to rearrange rides so that his team can continue working. The traditional way for Sheriff Joe used to be that he goes and buys the vehicle for $50,000 to $70,000, or he has to go through a big company and lease them. Now there's some problems here, because hypothetical Sheriff Joe Miller goes and asks his counsel for the money, but they end up asking him endless questions. They then suggest Joe goes and looks at leasing vehicles, so he reluctantly does. So Joe goes on to Google to see which companies will lease him police vehicles. He chooses to contact the big companies because they have a familiar name and they show up first on Google. Let's call them Steal Your Prize. Weeks later, after he finally gets through their queue, he eventually gets on a call with Steal Your Prize, and they learn that Joe only needs 1 to 5 vehicles. Well, the rep at Steal Your Prize tells Joe that he's going to have to get some more vehicles lined up if he is going to end up working with them. He doesn't want to have to go and rally other towns or more people in the county to get more vehicles, so he decides he's just going to go ahead and go down to the local dealership. The local dealer shows him around and he sees a used patrol car with maybe 100,000 miles on it. He's also got some basic trucks that he can fulfill for Joe. Joe doesn't really like any of these options, but he has to take whatever the dealer has. So the dealer walks him inside and hands him a stack of papers, and Joe doesn't realize how much paperwork is involved. He starts going through and seeing line by line of lots of mumbo jumbo and techno babble that confuses the hell out of Joe. The sheriff doesn't want to waste time trying to figure out where the hidden fees are and what he can and can't do to the vehicle. But after Joe spends hours reading through paperwork, he thinks he has an idea of what he's going to have to pay. But then he gets told that he has to then meet with the bank, and the bank then has to qualify him, which takes a whole other day of Joe's time. The bank wants to sit down and go through everything that Joe's doing. But because Joe has also told them about going down his other options, the bank and the dealer know that they can take Joe for what he has. They can add on those hidden costs. They can put them in wherever they want because Joe's not even going to notice and he needs that vehicle. Joe doesn't feel proud of this decision once he finally gets the vehicle. What he feels is worn down and he's frustrated by how much work he's had to do, and he doesn't feel good driving this basic vehicle around. Well, a couple years go by and Joe's truck starts acting up. He takes it to the local mechanic who says that the engine is bad and it's going to cost him $5,200. And it's going to be out in the shop for several weeks before Joe gets it back. So in the meantime, Joe has to then go get approval from his counsel to pay for the repairs of the truck, and they tell him, "Didn't we just get that truck a few years ago?" This makes Joe feel like he made a mistake. He feels like he's done a bad job, and he doesn't feel like this looks good for him. He feels judged by his counsel and his team. This is the traditional way of what we're saying is finally over. This is what we're saying that small towns, mid-sized towns, and counties don't have to worry about when it comes to police fleet management. This no longer has to be a problem for Joe or for you. At MFS, we remove all of the headaches that come from situations like this. You no longer have to worry about finding the right vehicles, not have to worry about haggling to get the best prices, not having to sit at a dealership and filling out endless paperwork and wasting time. You no longer have to worry about unreliable vehicles that sit in the shop eating away at your fleet budget. Our team of experts at Municipal Fleet Services takes the stress out of fleet management. We have relationships with over 35 banks and can get them into a bidding war so that they can give you the best options. We also have relationships with the manufacturers and go directly to them, cutting out all of the middlemen and all of the additional costs that come with that. We work harder to make police fleet management easy. We are MFS, your new team of police fleet advisors.